Okay, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about PowerPivot for reporting and contrast it with regular Excel. And here we have a pretty standard management report showing expenses for a group of vineyards. On the left here, these are the operations expenses, things that managers can more or less influence, and followed by things they pretty much can't. This is for fiscal year 18, year to date through March. Spend year to date, 75.9 million. Our rolling forecast says we're going to spend another 29.511 million before the end of the fiscal year. Add that together, 105.4 is the projected year-end spend. A few months ago, we had done an LE2, which is a mid-year rebudget that said we were going to ultimately spend 108.3 million. We're going to beat that. We're going to come in underneath that by 2.9 million. On the other hand, versus original budget, we're going to come in over budget. Over a year ago, we said that we were going to spend 101.5 million, and the 105 we're actually going to end up spending is 3.859 in excess of that, or 3.7% unfavorable variance. Now, where does all this begin? Of course, it begins with data tables. We have actual data, we have data for budget, we have data for our LE2, we have data for our fiscal year 18 rolling forecast, and this should be pretty familiar. Most ERP systems will kick out data tables that look something like this, or we configure it as analysts to look something like this. Dates across the top, that's the way humans think. Of course, this would be gibberish to a computer. A computer is not going to tolerate dates as field headers. But analysts do look at it this way. This would all have to be unpivoted during the query and shaping and transformation process, which is pretty straightforward to do in Power Query. But normally and traditionally what the analysts would do, they would start looking at these drop-down menus and then click in here and start hunting and pecking by business unit, for example, particular calculations for subtotals by different dimensions. This is a familiar but unwieldy way to manage data, but we have all done it. And it's hard to link together various data sources. You have to use a series of VLOOKUPs and index and match and sum if and so forth, and that's been traditionally what we've done. However, there's a much better way of doing it now with the tools that are available. First of all, we want to designate the different dimensions by which we want to look at our data, because data tables are just what happened or what we expected to happen. Lookup tables are the dimensions by which we want to look at our data. If you have a sales table, you're going to have records of a year or years of sales records. We want to be able to understand what was sold, what region was it sold in, who was the salesperson, and product ID and so forth. Those are what lookup tables are for. And we see that we've created a bunch of virtual lookup tables. It looks like this within PowerPivot. We create relationships between our four data tables down here and our lookup tables. We want to be able to reach into our data and slice and dice it by date, for example, by process, by area or region, by business unit, and so forth. And so once we create these relationships, the magic starts to happen. We can look at the same data and start building calculations and measures here that crunch billions of data points virtually instantly and create powerful insights that we can drop into our reports. Moving lots of data very, very quickly is what it's all about. Let's go back to our original report. We can see that we have a very interesting negative variance here. This is $278,000 negative in the leasing area. Now, what's driving that? We can see very quickly with a click, it's in the Mid-Sonoma region. 221,000 of that 278 is from this particular region, Mid-Sonoma. Okay, what business unit in particular? Well, most of it's being driven by Black Fern Vineyard. So now we know the business unit. Now let's investigate further and say exactly what GL line item are we talking about? What type of lease within the leasing category are we talking? It's property leases. That means land leases. Okay, 187. So it's all land leases. And now we see the time intelligence functionality come into play. It's extremely powerful. It's not possible in traditional Excel. Boom. We can see that our latest estimate has a series of typos in it. In other words, we saw that the expense had gone up from 77 to 140, and that's what we see in the actuals. But for whatever reason, in January, we reverted back to last year's lease rates, and we projected those going forward. That is not what we want. This should all be 140. This should all be 0. And we should not be reporting a negative variance or going to a vineyard manager and asking questions. First of all, he's going to say, I don't control lease contract rates, don't bother me. But more importantly, we can go to the analyst and say, okay, this is a series of typos that we need to figure out how to change the interface in the budgeting process. We need to figure out how to have better controls. We did the same thing down in Black Mask. And this is an example of how powerful the time intelligence functionality can be in getting to the bottom of things and asking better questions very quickly. Right from the management report itself, we can start asking questions. We don't have to worry about following chains of sum ifs and links to different tabs and hoping that the numbers are right. They're always going to be right because they're coming out of data tables that have been scrubbed and cleaned. What's very powerful also is that just interacting with the report, different users are going to have different levels of sophistication. Some are going to get overwhelmed by this much information, so we can give the option to just drill into what's of importance to them. So the manager of the Mid-Sonoma region, he just wants to see this, and then he wants to look at his vineyards maybe on an individual basis. And so he can quickly and easily do that. It's just like ordering off a menu at a restaurant. It's very quick and easy to do. And we can go through time very, very quickly. We can just look at a 1 month. We can look at quarters. Now, different companies have fiscal year, vintage year, calendar year. These are extremely important functionalities to be able to go back and forth by different time periods without any kind of fuss or worrying about if a link is going to break or if it's grabbing data the correct way. And that's what makes PowerPivot so much more powerful than traditional Excel, is you spend very, very little time actually building reports, and you spend more time analyzing reports because different people want to see the data in a different way. For example, not everybody's going to care about how travel and expense is performing. A manager might want to see how regions are performing. So with just a few clicks, we can go ahead and build a new report that gives the exact same information, but instead of by expense category, by region. So we can start investigating what's going on region by region without any chance of error or worrying about getting off base versus what other people are looking at. Everybody will see and understand and say, okay, yeah, my numbers tie, your numbers tie. We're just looking at things in a different configuration. Building a report in regular Excel that would do this, first of all, you can't. It would take almost as long to rebuild a report by different dimensions as it did to build the original report. This changes configuration in seconds without chance of error. This is what next generation self-service BI looks like. It gets people away from non-analytical overhead, because building the report shouldn't be where your time is spent. People don't go to school and get degrees so they can move numbers around and hope they're right. We want people operating at the highest end of their license, not at the lowest. And we want to free them up from non-analytical overhead and debt service to spreadsheets. We want to eliminate the chance of error, and we want to have people operating using their mind rather than using their hands to manually switch things around. That's going to drive profits. That's going to attract people and keep better people. You don't want to frustrate people with tools that force them to operate at the bottom of their license. Power BI is about moving from the world of delays and errors into the world of speed and accuracy, and that benefits everyone at every level of the organization.